CEO fired me by text while I was in Dubai on business. He had no idea who was sitting beside me. He was my biggest competitor in the Middle East market. We had never met face-to-face before, but his reputation preceded him. Sharp, calculating, and known for turning every competitor's weakness into his own advantage. "Mr. Roth," he said, extending a firm handshake. "I've heard impressive things about Harrison Tech's expansion under your leadership." "Mr. Holloway," I replied with equal poise. "The feeling is mutual. Crescent Digital's growth in the region has been remarkable. We may be competitors, but quality recognizes quality." The evening unfolded smoothly. Awards were handed out, speeches delivered, and I networked with potential clients over champagne and polite conversation. Then, at 9:47 p.m. Dubai time, 1:47 p.m. back in New York, my phone buzzed. At first, I nearly ignored it. Almost. But the sender's name froze me in place. Richard Harrison, our CEO, the man who had hired me 6 years ago. I expected a congratulatory note about the event, maybe a reminder for a Monday morning meeting. Instead, I read 8 words that shattered everything. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. HR will contact you." I blinked. Read it again. Then again. No explanation. No phone call. Not even a thank you for 6 years of loyal service. Just a cold corporate dismissal, sent by text message, while I sat in a room full of industry leaders, representing the very company that had just discarded me like yesterday's coffee. Suddenly, the champagne tasted bitter. My eyes stayed fixed on the glowing screen, though it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. Around me, glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and a keynote speaker droned on about digital transformation. But to me, it all faded into static, meaningless white noise. My first instinct was to call Harrison right then and there, to demand answers, maybe even make a scene. But I didn't. 6 years in international business had taught me one thing: never react in the heat of emotion. Never show your cards until you understand the game. So, I slipped the phone back in my jacket pocket and forced myself to take a measured sip of champagne. "Everything all right?" Amir asked, noticing my distraction. "Just business back home," I lied smoothly. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." The truth was it couldn't wait. Not really. That text felt surreal, like reading your own obituary while still very much alive. But I needed time. Time to think, to process, to understand the battlefield I had just been thrust onto. As the night carried on, conversations drifted around me, but I was somewhere else entirely, already calculating my next move. A German executive was discussing supply chain optimization. 2 women from a Finnish startup debated venture capital trends. Their voices blurred together, distant and muted, like watching a movie with the volume turned down. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jessica from HR, 26 years old, fresh out of an MBA program, and somehow now in charge of ending my 6-year career. "Hi, Damien," the message began. "I know this is unexpected. Richard asked me to handle the transition. Your company credit card will be deactivated by midnight EST. Please arrange your own flight home and submit receipts for reimbursement. Your final paycheck will reflect unused vacation days, minus the recovery of any company equipment. All client contacts and proprietary information remain confidential per your original agreement. Let me know if you have questions." The clinical coldness of it was almost impressive. 6 years reduced to a checklist of administrative tasks. No acknowledgement of my work, my sacrifices, or my results. Just corporate damage control, delivered by someone who probably made $68,000 a year. I glanced around the room at executives who had built empires, entrepreneurs who had changed industries, leaders who understood loyalty and long-term vision. Then my eyes returned to the screen, messages from a man who had just thrown away one of his greatest assets in the worst possible way at the worst possible moment. That's when it hit me, sharp and undeniable. This wasn't about me losing my job. This was about Richard Harrison making the dumbest business decision of his career. And he had no idea what kind of chain reaction he just set in motion. I turned to Amir Holloway, the billionaire seated beside me. "Mr. Holloway," I said, my tone calm but deliberate. there's something I'd like to share with you. Something I think you'll find very interesting from a business perspective. He set down his glass of wine and gave me his full attention. In our industry, when a senior executive says they have something important to share, he said, "You listen." I held his gaze, steady and professional. 30 minutes ago, I received a text message. I was just terminated from Harrison Tech by text. While I sat there representing the company at this event, Amir's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's highly unusual," he said. "It gets better," I continued. "No prior warning, no discussion, no transition plan. Just a cold corporate message, followed by HR instructions to find my own way home." I handed him my phone. Amir read the messages carefully, his expression shifting from surprise to something that looked dangerously close to predatory interest. "May I ask why?" he said. "I honestly don't know," I replied. "But I have a theory." Richard's nephew, Trevor, graduated from Wharton in 2023. For the past 10 months, he's been shadowing different departments, learning the ropes. My guess? This has more to do with nepotism than with my performance. Amir leaned back, studying me with the calculating gaze of a man who had built a billion-dollar empire by spotting opportunity the moment it appeared. "Tell me about your client relationships," he said quietly. "Confidential, of course," I replied. "But I can tell you this. Harrison Tech's Middle East revenue grew from $0 to $38 million during my tenure. Most of those clients trust me personally, not the company. And yet, Harrison's leadership seems to think those relationships will transfer seamlessly to—" I paused. "Trevor, apparently." For the first time that evening, Amir smiled. Not the polite, diplomatic smile he'd worn all night, but something sharper. The expression of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "Mr. Roth," he said, "I think we should continue this conversation tomorrow. Are you free for lunch?" Unemployed for exactly 30 minutes, my schedule had never been clearer. "I'd be delighted," I replied. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced networking and hollow congratulations. I accepted handshakes for awards I might never see, smiled at colleagues who didn't yet know I'd been cast aside, and carried myself with the same polished professionalism that had served me for 6 years. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The humiliation was hardening into something else, something colder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous than wounded pride. Richard Harrison hadn't just made a mistake. He had made the mistake, discarding his most valuable asset at the worst possible moment, in front of the worst possible person. And tomorrow, I would begin showing him exactly how expensive that mistake would be. The next morning, February 19th, I woke up in my suite at the Atlantis with a strange sense of calm. My company credit card had been deactivated, as promised, but I'd already transferred enough personal funds to cover an extended stay. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to check emails or prepare for a morning call with New York. Instead, I ordered room service, shakshuka, and strong Arabic coffee, and sat down to make a list. Not a list of complaints or emotional rants, but a cold, strategic assessment of Harrison Tech's vulnerabilities. 6 years of building their international presence had given me an intimate understanding of every weakness in their armor. At noon, I met Amir at Nobu in Atlantis, the Palm. The restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the Arabian Gulf, but Amir's focus was fixed entirely on me. "I've been thinking about our discussion last night," he began, after we placed our orders. "Your situation presents some interesting possibilities." "I'm listening," I said. "Harrison Tech's Middle East operation relies heavily on personal relationships." "Correct. Your personal relationships." I nodded. "In this region, business isn't just about software. It's about trust, consistency. Clients buy into people, not just products. And while the contracts are with Harrison Tech, not with me personally, those agreements have renewal dates, performance clauses, and termination conditions. Most of our major clients are on 2-year terms, all coming up for renewal between now and December." Amir smiled knowingly. "Tell me about the renewal process." Standard procedure was that I would begin discussions 120 days in advance, rebuilding value, addressing concerns, negotiating terms. Without that relationship management, I let the sentence trail off. They're vulnerable. Amir finished for me. Extremely, I agreed. And Richard just eliminated their only insurance policy in this market. Amir leaned forward, his eyes sharp. What would you say to joining Crescent Digital as our new director of strategic partnerships for the Western markets? I had anticipated this, but hearing it out loud carried weight. What exactly would that entail? Leading our expansion into North America and Europe, developing client relationships, building the kind of international presence Harrison Tech thought they had. He paused, then added, the salary would be $400,000 annually, plus equity participation and performance bonuses. My Harrison Tech salary had been $280,000. This wasn't just an offer. It was a statement. There's something else, Amir continued. I want you to start immediately, tomorrow, before you return to New York. I raised an eyebrow. Why return to New York? He gave a thin smile. Your expertise is most valuable here, where you understand both markets. Here, where you understand both markets. We'll handle your relocation, visa arrangements, everything. The strategy revealed itself clearly. While Harrison Tech scrambled to figure out their Middle East operations without me, I would be inside their most important emerging market, building competitive relationships. Elegant, legal, devastating. I accept, I said. That very afternoon, I stepped into my new role with a series of carefully planned calls. Not to Harrison Tech's clients. That would have been unethical, even risky, but to industry contacts, suppliers, and partners who worked with multiple players in the field. Hi, this is Damian Roth. I began each conversation. I want to let you know I've joined Crescent Digital as Director of Strategic Partnerships. I'm looking forward to exploring new collaboration opportunities. Word travels fast in specialized industries. By Thursday, February 21st, I was already hearing things I hadn't asked for. Heard Harrison Tech is having some transition challenges in the Middle East, one supplier mentioned casually. Trevor Harrison called yesterday, asking about compliance requirements, another said. Seemed unfamiliar with the regional regulations. A third contact added, your replacement reached out about the Dubai implementation. Nice kid, but he didn't understand the technical specifications. I hadn't sought out this intelligence. I didn't solicit complaints about Harrison Tech. But simply by existing in my new role, the industry's gossip network was handing me a steady stream of information. By Friday, February 22nd, the picture was undeniable. Harrison Tech was scrambling. Trevor, Richard's nephew, had been tossed into deep water without swimming lessons. Client calls were being mishandled. Technical questions were going unanswered. Renewal discussions were being delayed or ignored entirely. Meanwhile, I was settling into Crescent Digital's Dubai office, getting familiar with their systems and building rapport with my new colleagues. Amir had been right. My expertise was perfectly positioned to help them expand into Western markets. On Sunday, February 24th, exactly 1 week after my termination, my phone lit up with a familiar name. Sarah, my former assistant. She had been with Harrison Tech for 9 years, and with me directly for the last 4. Damian, I hope you don't mind me calling, she began. I got your number from your LinkedIn update. Of course not, Sarah, I replied. How are things? Honestly, chaotic. Trevor's trying, but he's in over his head. Richard's asking why clients aren't returning calls. The Bahrain project has stalled. No one understands the compliance requirements. That's unfortunate, I said, keeping my tone neutral. There's more. For clients have asked about you specifically. When they found out you'd left, they requested immediate meetings to discuss their options. A flicker of cold satisfaction ran through me, but I kept my voice professional. I'm sure Trevor will find his footing. Maybe, she said quietly. But Damian, I've been thinking about my own future too. This place isn't the same without proper leadership. Our conversation lasted another 10 minutes. Sarah wasn't the only long-term employee questioning her future at Harrison Tech. Leadership's impulsive choices had created ripples turning into waves. After he hung up, I sat in my new Dubai office, watching the sunset cast the Burj Khalifa in molten gold. Richard Harrison had fired me over text, thinking he was cutting costs and clearing a path for his nephew. Instead, he'd handed his biggest competitor inside knowledge, weakened relationships with major clients, and destabilized his own team. The irony? I didn't need to sabotage a single thing. My revenge was effortless. All I had to do was excel in my new role, while Harrison Tech realized, piece by painful piece, exactly what they'd lost. And they were realizing it much faster than I expected. 3 weeks into my new position at Crescent Digital, in early March, the calls began. The first was from Ahmad Rashid, CEO of Gulf Logistics Solutions, Harrison Tech's largest Middle East client, with a $12 million annual contract. I had personally negotiated their implementation 2 years earlier, and Ahmad and I had built a strong working relationship. "Damien, I heard you've moved to Crescent Digital," Ahmad said during what sounded like a casual check-in call. "That's correct. I'm excited about the opportunities here." "I'm glad to hear it. We've had concerns with our current provider. The new contact doesn't understand our regional requirements, and response times have slipped." I listened carefully, offering no criticism of Harrison Tech, only asking thoughtful questions about Gulf Logistics' current needs and future expansion. By the end of the call, Ahmad requested a proposal to migrate their operations to Crescent Digital's platform. "We value consistency and expertise," he said, "and those qualities seem to have followed you." 2 days later, I got a similar call from Marina Petrov of Black Sea Shipping, then David Kim of Asia Pacific Manufacturing, then Roberto Santos from Latin American Trade Solutions. The pattern was undeniable. Harrison Tech service quality had deteriorated the moment I left. Clients were frustrated. The expertise they relied on had vanished, and they were actively searching for alternatives. I didn't chase them, and I didn't steal anyone away. They came to me because they wanted the same level of service they'd grown used to and weren't getting anymore. Meanwhile, Sarah continued sharing occasional updates from inside Harrison Tech. Not as a spy, not through anything unethical, just as a longtime colleague confiding in someone she trusted. "Richard's getting nervous," she said one evening in late March. "2 major clients are already considering other providers. Trevor doesn't understand why. And Richard keeps asking what you did to turn them against the company." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "The truth," she replied. "You didn't do anything to them. You just did everything for them. And now that's gone." The real turning point came in early April, when Richard Harrison himself called me. After 6 years of working side by side, after firing me over a text message, now he was the one reaching out. "Damien," he began, trying for a casual tone but failing. "I hope there are no hard feelings about how things ended. Business decisions, you understand?" "Of course, Richard," I said evenly. "I wish you and Trevor the best. I'm calling because some of our Middle East clients are having difficulties with the transition. I thought maybe you could step in as a consultant, help smooth things over, ensure continuity." The audacity stunned me. Fire me by text, then ask me to fix the mess that decision created? "I appreciate the offer," I told him, "but I'm fully committed to my role at Crescent Digital. I'm sure Trevor will find his way." He pressed on. "Well, if you change your mind, we could discuss very competitive compensation." I almost laughed. "I'm happy where I am, Richard, but thank you for thinking of me." 3 more minutes of strained small talk, and the call ended. That's when it hit me. Richard finally understood what he'd lost, but his realization had come 7 weeks too late. By April, Harrison Tech's problems were undeniable. Sarah's updates and industry chatter painted the same picture. The Middle East market was slipping through their fingers. The lack of regional expertise was glaring, and major clients were openly considering alternatives. Meanwhile, Crescent Digital was thriving. Our Western expansion was outperforming every projection. We'd signed 3 major North American contracts, broken into Europe, and forged global partnerships that set us up for long-term success. Amir had been right. My skills were exactly what they needed to compete worldwide. The final chapter arrived in late July 2024, just 5 months after my termination. Sarah called with the news. Harrison Tech had been acquired by a German consortium for about 70% of its market value from 6 months earlier. "Richard's staying on as a regional manager," she said. "Most of the senior staff are being let go as redundant. I've already accepted a new position elsewhere." I'm sorry to hear that, I told her, but I'm glad you've landed in a better place. She laughed softly. It's actually exciting. Better opportunity, better leadership. Sometimes losing what you thought was security opens the door to something much better. She was describing my journey perfectly. That evening, I stood on my Dubai marina balcony, watching the city lights shimmer against the water. The last 5 months had been a masterclass in unintended consequences. Richard Harrison had made one rash decision, firing a loyal employee by text to clear the way for nepotism. That single choice set off a chain reaction that destroyed his company's independence. I hadn't plotted his downfall. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't broken a single rule. I'd simply stayed excellent at what I do, this time in a place that actually valued it. The revenge was poetic in its simplicity. I succeeded. He failed, and his failure was entirely his own doing. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Amir. Board approved your promotion to VP of Global Expansion. Congratulations. Well deserved. I smiled and typed back, thank you. Looking forward to the new challenges. 5 months earlier, I'd been humiliated in a room full of industry leaders. Tonight, I was a vice president at one of the fastest growing tech companies in the Middle East. I was living in one of the most dynamic cities on earth, holding equity stakes worth more than I'd ever dreamed of. Richard Harrison had given me an invaluable lesson. Sometimes the best revenge is letting incompetent people destroy themselves, while you build something better. Because in the end, loyalty, expertise, and professionalism aren't just nice words. They're the foundation of real, lasting success. When leaders abandon those principles, the consequences are inevitable. And sometimes, those consequences write the perfect ending to someone else's story.